Hello everyone, you're soon going to understand why I did not start my video with "Hello, it's American English Russell," because I'm wanting to tell you about a very sad moment in my life in American history. If you notice the date, today is September 11th, 2021. September 11th, 9/11. And even those of you who were not alive yet know that on September 11th, 2001, one of the most tragic and horrible events in the history of the world occurred. And that of course, is the terror attacks that happened on American soil at the hands of Al-Qaeda, run by their former leader, Osama bin Laden. I was a university student 20 years ago today, and not long after the terror attacks of 9/11, there was an American country music artist named Toby Keith who wrote a song talking about the events of that day, and that song has basically become the anthem for 9/11. And one of the lyrics that Toby sings in that song, he says, "Where were you when the world stopped turning?" And this lyric says so much, because for those of us who were alive, especially adults, completely aware people, all of us can tell you exactly where we were and what we were doing when we found out that our country was under attack at the hands of terrorists. So I want to share with you my memories from that day, just kind of a storytelling time. So in the fall semester of 2001, I was enrolled as a student at Boyce College, which has a beautiful campus here in my city of Louisville, Kentucky. And that semester I had a class, a short class, every morning from 8 o'clock until 8:45 a.m. And then I had another class that began at 10 a.m. and I think it went until 1 in the afternoon. It was a much longer, more difficult class. But because of this kind of gap in between that early morning class and the other class, it was my habit to basically every morning go to the coffee and donut shop that existed on the campus of my university. And on the morning of September 11th, as I had been dismissed from the first class, I was feeling hungry. And I went to that little donut shop and I got a small coffee and a chocolate Long John donut. And I went into a room that was nearby. This room was just sort of a study room. Normally it was quiet, maybe just a few people in there, but there was a television in that room. And I had sat down as I was drinking my coffee, eating my donut. I had just opened a textbook to study for the class that I had to go to next. And a young man, a fellow student, comes running into the room, and I think there was maybe 3 of us in the room at the time. And he says, hey guys, I'm really sorry to bother you, but I just got a phone call from my father, and he says that I must turn on a television right away because something really big has happened in New York. Do you guys mind if I turn on this TV? And I think one of the guys kind of said something like, yeah, please don't. And the other guy and I said, yeah, sure, go ahead, no problem. And so I stopped what I was doing because now I'm very curious what the heck's going on. And he turned on the TV. On every channel there's just live feed of cameras on some big buildings in New York City. I didn't know what these buildings were, didn't know what I was watching, and as I'm listening, they're telling us that a plane has hit one of the World Trade Center towers. At this time, everyone's kind of assuming this is some kind of freak accident. I mean, there's other times in the history of the world where especially small planes, private planes, have accidentally hit buildings in major cities around the world. So we're kind of sitting there thinking, now what in the heck happened? Did a pilot have a heart attack and flew into a plane? What's going on? And As we're sitting there listening to these newscasters speculate and share information as it's rolling in, all of a sudden we start seeing another plane come across the sky, and it hits the second tower. And of course, anybody with a brain at all knows at that point this is no accident. That would be entirely too coincidental. And one of the other guys and I start saying, "Hey, what the hell's going on here?" And before long, this room that normally has only 2 or 3 men in there studying quietly is completely packed with 60 people just wanting to watch this TV. And a man who was a student and also went to the same church that I went to, he comes into the room and he stands in front of the TV and he says, "Guys, we need to stop what we're doing and start praying." And we say, "Okay." And he mutes the television and he starts pouring out his heart in prayer, and people are crying. And finally it comes time where I need to go to that second class, and I come into the class. All the students sit down. We're all in a very somber mood. Some are crying, some are talking. But then my professor comes in, my favorite professor I ever had, a man named Dr. Charles Draper. And Dr. Draper comes in and he comes to the little lecture podium and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, for obvious reasons, we are not having class today. I want to say a prayer before I let you guys just go home." Dr. Draper, an old man, little frail old man, but one of those guys that just has centuries of wisdom in his eyes. He puts his old hands on the side of the podium and he starts just saying, "Oh my dear God, I don't know what has happened here today, but there are innocent Americans dying, and please be with those grieving." He pours out his heart in prayer for 20 minutes. And when he's done, I finally go home back to the little apartment that I was living in at the time, and I'm glued to the television all day. And throughout the course of the day, another plane hits the Pentagon outside of Washington, D.C. Another plane crashes into a field, and we later learned that that plane was likely headed towards the White House to attack the president. A lot of emotions, a lot of memories from that day. But one thing that happened that day that I wish I knew the rest of the story. But when I was back in that first room and we're first figuring out that we are under attack, a young man who I had had one class with, his name was Mitchell. I think he was maybe 21, 22 years old. He looks at me and he says, "Well, Russ, I guess I'm joining the Army." And the fact is, hundreds of thousands of young men and women, in response to this attack, flooded local military recruiting offices. They showed up and said, "Hey, whoever did this, I'm going to kill him. I want to join." In fact, very old men, veterans of Vietnam War, guys who are now old guys, not capable or eligible of military service, flooded recruiting offices and said, "Look, I know I'm 65, I know I'm 70 years old, but if you'll take me, I'm going to kill whoever did this." And that young man, Mitchell, after that day, I never saw him again. I found out later that he kept his word, and on September 12th, he did in fact go to an Army recruiting office and he enlisted in the Army. I pray to God that that man is now raising a family, happy somewhere, but I have no idea what happened to Mitchell. You know that the purpose of my channel, above all, is to help you learn American English. So I hope that by sharing this story of my memory of the events of September 11, 2001, you've heard something interesting to you from the standpoint of learning English. But what I'm most curious about is, where were you when the world stopped turning on that bright September day? Please share with me below in the comments. Where were you? What were you doing when America was so viciously attacked? Now that we have 20 years of distance, I've processed the emotions, I've grieved, but you don't know how hard I'm holding back tears and anger right now. I love you. I'm glad that you're safe wherever you are. Peace and blessings, my friends.